Hello and welcome back to my channel. This is my 2709 Dell monitor and I've been using this quite a lot as a main desktop computer before I moved it here in my workshop, and I really like it despite having a damage here on the right hand side because it takes everything: VGA, HDMI, DisplayPort, DVI, composite component. And most importantly, it works with all those weird retro machines like the Commodore 64, the Apple II, the ZX Spectrum. It takes everything, it displays everything perfectly fine. I really like this monitor. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't power up anymore. It stopped working a few days ago. So the plan would be to open it up, take a look and see if by any chance we can fix it, because I really like the monitor. So let me thank the sponsor of this video, PCBWay, and let's open the monitor and see if we can do anything for it. Alright, the monitor is open. This is a monitor from more or less 2009. 2709 stands for 2009, so it's quite chunky and big. I guess nowadays it's like a fraction of this. You can see here on the top of the chassis the power supply, the big power supply. Oh, this is not an LED monitor, by the way. It's a CCAFL, if I'm saying that right. So I guess it needs some sort of high voltage going to the lamps as well. But anyways, that's the power supply, and this is the main board with this little daughter board, let's call it that way, for USB. I don't think you can control the monitor via USB. It's just that you had an uplink from your computer, and you could plug your mouse in here rather than have wires going around the desk. And also you could plug your memory card in here. Got compact flash, and I think it's an SD. Now, because this monitor has a soft power button, it's not latching in position, I'm assuming that the power supply will send some standby voltage, like to an ATX power supply, to the main board, and the main board will turn the power supply fully on when it detects the power on from the push button here. Now, this monitor actually already stopped working like a couple of months ago. It was doing exactly the same, but when I went to try and look into it, it was working again. I left it unplugged for a couple of days and then it was working. So happy days, but then it's happening again. So I'm assuming, I'm hoping, to be honest, that there is a problem with the power supply. So the first step would be to check whether the power supply is outputting anything. When it's just plugged in, there should be this kind of standby voltage or something, I'm assuming. And then we'll move from there. So first thing first, let's plug the monitor and let's see if we get any voltage coming out of this connector here. Right, the monitor is plugged in, my isolation transformer. Let's power up. I heard a click coming from this thing, so this is not completely dead. There's something happening. So let's check on these connector here and see if we have any voltage whatsoever. Yes, we do have 24 volts on orange. So I'm assuming that's my standby voltage. We also have 24 volts on green. And we also have 24 volts on blue. Why do I have a feeling that this monitor is not working? Let me plug the front panel back again and see if I turn it on, if it works. Okay, let's see if it works now. Power up, I heard a click again, so the power supply is definitely doing something. And let's push the on button here. Oh, it's not working. Okay, fair enough. That's good. I would say that is good. Right, so I had a look online, and unfortunately the service manual for this monitor is not available. The 2707 is available, but it looks like a complete different design, so I can't really use it. But I found on BadCaps that these power supplies are only outputting 24 volts, so that is fine. And apparently, maybe the monitor is switching it to like low power, high power when it's switched on and off, but 24 volts is what this power supply is outputting. Now, I got the oscilloscope out simply because I want to see how those 24 volts are, because the chances are might be full of ripple because something is wrong with the capacitors. So let's probe one of these 24 volts lines, and we can see that here, I don't know, it says 23, but again, oscilloscopes are, at least my oscilloscope is not too accurate. It's 23.5, and it looks stable enough, to be honest. So I don't think we have a problem with the power supply, unfortunately, because, you know, that's an easier thing to look at, and it's also nice and spread around. It got all the components very well separated, so that would have been kind of easy to fix. Now, looking at the board, I see a couple of things. The first is this IC here, which is a G962. It's a voltage regulator, so it has an input as an output. So let's take a look at that. Now, this is the input. It says 3 volts in there. Chances are it could be 3.3, but anyways, it looks fine. And let's check the output of the regulator, which is 2.44, so probably 2.5, and that also looks fine. There is an enable pin on these voltage regulator, which I guess is enable, because it's actually running. And it is, the pin is set to 3 volts, and I'm guessing that's enough to enable the voltage regulator. So that looks fine. On this random inductor here, I'm also measuring 3 volts, and I'm measuring 5 volts on what I think is going to be like the USB, or anyways, the power to the little daughter board, which is going to the USB hub and the memory cards. So the thing is, there's definitely voltage coming to the board. Whether they're all the voltages, it's a little bit difficult without schematics. However, there's one thing I'm seeing here, and is that this capacitor here seems to have leaked, because I see a puddle of something underneath. Now, I have opened this monitor before, that was many years ago, and I think even if I have used some contact cleaner, should have gone by now, and there would be probably more sign of it. And it really looks it's coming from this capacitor, and these capacitors are not the best brand. It says Elite, at least the brown are Elite. That one, I don't know what that is, but they're not good brands, and this monitor is many years old. This is now 15 years old. So, you know, it could be that one capacitor is causing this trouble. Now, the other thing I'm reading online is that some people with a similar problem with this monitor, they've resolved it by reflowing the main IC, which is under this heatsink, which is probably not super easy to remove. I probably have to remove the board. It's a BGA chip, of course, as usually happens, and apparently reflowing that chip has fixed the monitor in more than one occasions. Now, whether it's an actual flow with the balls under the IC, or maybe there's something like the PlayStation 3, that something has failed inside the IC, I don't know. Will it work? Will it last? I don't know, but that could be something I can try. The next thing I want to try before using some hot air to try and revive those capacitors and see if by any chance the monitor starts is to probe the keyboard cable here, because apparently it's a serial communication and you should be able to see something if the CPU has initialized. If the CPU has not initialized, that means, well, that the CPU has a problem. And no, I do not see anything on that line. I can see there is a 5 volts coming in, which I'm assuming is probably the supply. I'm assuming there is a little IC on the keyboard to process the data. And then I see a line which is stuck at 3.3 volts. There it is. It says 2.9, but again, I think that's the 3.3. And nothing happens when I'm pushing the button. The monitor is at an angle because I need the button outside of my desk. So that might suggest that the CPU is not initializing for whatever reason. Another thing I'm noticing on the board are crystals for clocks. And what I've noticed is that if I'm probing them, I get some voltage. This has, I guess, 3.3 on one leg and 3.3 on the other one. But there's no clock coming out, so I'm not sure if it's supposed to be like that or something is wrong. Honestly, no, I have no idea. And they're all like that. We have 1, 2, 3. Actually, well, some don't have any voltage at all, which might be normal. And there's one here on, let's call it the USB board. And there is nothing there either. So, well, obviously the processor without clocks cannot work. And I'm wondering whether that is the problem. I doubt it. Or it's the consequence of something else not working. I don't know. Another thing is that the board seems completely cold. My current limiter says that this is drawing 2.2 watts. But again, the power supply is not going to be 100% efficient. I don't hear anything being warm or even lukewarm. Everything is stone cold, which is not great. The CPU, fair enough, it's under the heatsink, but it's completely very, very cold. Everything is cold. My next step would be to try and warm up these capacitors, especially because I see the little residue that suggests that one capacitor has leaked. I'd like to warm up the capacitors because when you warm up capacitors, they will temporarily regain consciousness. They will come back to life. Even completely dead ones will work might work when they're warmed up. So I'll try that and see if by any chance this thing works. I guess I'll have to remove power, warm up the capacitor, apply power and see if it works, and do that several times until, if any, the monitor starts up. After warming up that area, the monitor will still not start. I put away the hot air and started doing other things. About a minute later though, I unintentionally touched the power button at the corner of the monitor and... Hey! It's working. Why? Why? Why are you now working? Tell me. Oh yeah, I can see the lamp from here. So it's definitely working. It was on and it's just switched off. Completely working. Look at that. Yeah, I can see the lamps in here. You can see the lamp here where I have my finger. Well, you can't see the finger, but I'll put an arrow in post-production. If I switch it off, there you go, the switch off. So the monitor is working. All I did, I just warmed up these capacitors here. I really didn't do anything else at all whatsoever. Was that enough? And the capacitors, yeah, they warmed up. They're still kind of warm. Maybe that's it. Maybe that's all it needs. What I can try to do, I can cool them down and see if by any chance the monitor stops working again. Still working. I love this. No, I don't. But anyways. No, it's working. There it is. It stopped working. So it's something around here, which is where the capacitor has shown some leakage. So obviously when I warmed up this area here, obviously, the hot air will go around, and now it's not working because I cooled down these capacitors here. And I guess that if I turn it on, wait a minute until the power supply discharges, and warm up this area here instead, everything will work again automatically. Yeah, it's working. So I'm assuming it's one of those. Let's do a final test, cool them down again and see what happens. Yeah, not working anymore. Okay, well, I would say that's good news. I'm hoping that it's not something else and just the heat and the cold is affecting something else in the area. So now that with the monitor back like in a working state, even though it's actually in standby, it's switched off, the lamps are switched off, the clock is back. So these capacitors somehow are controlling, I guess, the way the whole board turns on. And if the clock doesn't come up, obviously the CPU doesn't do anything. And I can see that it's only that clock there because I believe that that might be the main CPU. So that is the clock that controls, that supplies the CPU. Maybe this one could be like the video processor or something like that. So that's only needed when the monitor is actually turned on. Let's give that a go. Let's turn it on, assuming it's actually working. It is, and the clock comes up. Weird clock, but it does come up. And obviously, that's not necessary when the monitor is in standby. So the clock is weird. Now I'm using a long ground lead, so maybe that is the problem. Unless the capacitors are affecting that as well. Anyways, the board needs a recap, so we'll check again later. Recapping the board was not too hard. It was not as bad as a computer motherboard, but on some capacitors I had to use some hot air and low melt solder and reflow the pins several times before I could clear the holes. This happens because some pins are connected to the internal ground planes, which are usually big sheets of copper which basically act as a heatsink. Have you ever tried soldering on a heatsink? It's pretty difficult as the material sucks away the heat like water on a sponge. I spotted some further leakage under a few more capacitors. This was a set of 220 microfarad ones, and you can clearly see they had better days. The final smoothing capacitors on the power supply were also leaky, despite being of a good brand. Later on I'll show you why I think these capacitors failed. I had to order some extra capacitors, but silly me, I forgot these 22 microfarad 50 volts, so I replaced it with a 27 microfarad of matching voltage. After all, capacitors have 20% tolerance by design, so I hope this is going to be fine. While I'm trying to fix this monitor, a quick shout to my sponsor, PCBWay. I'm not a PCB designer myself, but there's plenty of free projects online, and you can find their Gerber file, which can be uploaded on PCBWay.com, and in no time you can place an order and receive excellent quality PCBs at your place. If you follow my channel, you know I've been using PCBWay for many of my projects, including these XT80 or my CRT tester here, the ring tester, and I can definitely vouch on the quality of the PCBs offered by PCBWay. If you need something 3D printed, well, you'll be happy to hear that PCBWay also offer 3D printing services, so take a look at PCBWay.com, the link is also down below in the description. As usual, let me thank PCBWay for sponsoring my channel. Their help makes these videos possible. So thank you very much, PCBWay, but now let's go back to the DELL monitor and see if I can make it work. Alright, everything is back on the chassis. Now before I power everything up, I've got the supply for the main board disconnected, so we can check that the 24 volts is there and there's no problem with the power supply. Okay, let's give power to the power supply in 3, 2, 1, go. Yeah, we got our 23.5, we had them before anyways, but those capacitors definitely needed to be replaced, so this is good. Let's plug the motherboard and see if everything works. I've got the monitor at an angle so I can access the power button that's just outside of my desk. It's time to give it power and see if it works. Means power in 3, 2, 1, go. We've got 24 volts and the monitor is still off. Let's try and turn it on. Oh, it's not turning on! No! Oh no! It's not working! Oh no! Why? Oh, come on. This is so disappointing. I thought it would work because of those tests that we did with the hot air, and I was really careful not to warm up anything around that capacitor, and it was working and stopping working with hot air and cold spray. So this is kind of weird, but it looks like, I'm hoping, well, I'm assuming it's the same fault and not something else. I might have broken something while recapping the monitor. So let's see whether we have a clock when we apply power. So let's apply power now. Well, no, we got 2 point something volts, but we don't have a clock. Yeah, I think that's what was happening before. We had a voltage, but no clock. So something is not initializing, and it's weird. It's so weird. Was not expecting this. Now, there's people online saying that they actually managed to fix these monitors by reflowing the mains processor, which is a BGA package. And obviously, when you're using hot air, you're warming up a little bit of everything. But my last tests were really with a very low airflow. So I was really only heating up these two capacitors there. Now, obviously, around the capacitors, you also have the memories. And who knows, maybe the main PCB is like flexing just enough to fix the main processor. So I guess I'll play with the hot air again, see number one if it comes back to life or if it's dead like for good. Again, it could be something I've done while recapping the monitor, and yeah, I guess I'll have to spend a little bit more time on this thing and find out what's wrong with it. Now, something I'm noticing is that when I apply power, there is clock for a split second. and it comes back when I remove power. So I cannot remember. I didn't really look too much into that last time. I'm not sure what's happening before, but have a look at that. The oscilloscope is in AC mode now, so it's not going up to 2.5 volts. And if I turn on 3, 2, 1, go, you see you got clock for a sec, then it stops. And if I remove power now, there you go. You got something out of it after, you know, a number of seconds. So not sure it was happening before. And now I'm wondering whether, again, it was happening, is something new, is the same thing. Let me play with the hot air. I think that will tell me whether the monitor is still working. I've just used hot air on the same area that I was warming up before I did the recap. You know, very slowly with very little airflow and focusing to the PCB, to be honest, and not the capacitors. And look what we got on the clock. 3, 2, 1, go. We got the clock, and the clock is staying, it's not going away. It's 20 megahertz, and I guess if I'm powering up, yeah, the thing is turning on. It's exactly as before. I used hot air like 200 degrees, so you know, nothing that really shouldn't flex anything or anything, and in the same area, and now it's working. What could possibly be? Now, in the past, I used to have the 24 inches version of this monitor, 24 or 9 or 8, one of those, and they both failed with a very similar failure mode. The monitors were not powering up when cold. It would take, I don't know, like half an hour of being plugged in, and then it would just start working. First, one failed, I fixed it, and then the other one failed exactly the same way, and I fixed it with exactly the same component. That is ages ago, way before this channel, and on both of the monitors it was the voltage regulator. And again, with hot air and cold spray, I could trigger the working, non-working state. So I'm wondering, because I've been playing around here, whether the issue is with the voltage regulator. I think it was a different one, but that was ages ago, absolutely ages ago, so I cannot remember. But let me try and play with cold spray and hot air on that voltage regulator and see what happens. Okay, well, so now it stopped working, even though I used quite a lot of cold spray, which obviously is going a bit everywhere, even though I've been trying to be careful. It can't be the processor. I'm too far away from the processor. I'm being careful with that. I can't understand what the problem is. Got my hot air at minimum. Let's try and warm up the voltage regulator again and see what happens now. Just the voltage regulator. Try again. 3, 2, 1, go. And it's working. Okay. Let's just try. Oh, this is just chasing my tail, right? Try again. Okay, regulator is cold, power on. No, I can't believe that I need to cool that down so much for the monitors to stop working. But eventually it will stop working, that's the problem. Now it is very cold, let's try again. And it stopped working. Oh gosh. Try again now that is warm. And it's working. Okay, I'm not entirely sure, but I'm being very careful. I mean, my hot air is a minimum. I can barely feel the airflow out of these hot air, so it's really a minimum speed. And when I use the cold spray, I'm being extra careful, even though obviously it's cold, which means, you know, it's just going anywhere, but it won't reach the processor. It won't reach this area of the board. It definitely won't reach the capacitors. I can't believe that. I think the next step is going to be to take this board out again and put it under the microscope and have a look at that voltage regulator, which I can reflow, because it could be just a little micro crack. And I'll also inspect nearby components and the back of the board. If I can't find anything and if it still doesn't work, I guess I will replace the voltage regulator just to be on the safe side. And now the voltage regulator seems to be fine. I don't see anything obvious, and I can't really see anything around the voltage regulator. So the only thing I can do before replacing the voltage regulator is to reflow everything, and I might go ahead and reflow the RAM as well, just to be on the safe side. Now let's take a look at the back of the board behind the voltage regulator. The voltage regulator is installed behind this pad, and there's really nothing around here. Nothing super nearby. There's some components here. I can try and inspect things a bit, but there's really nothing that can cause the problem from my point of view. The board is back in the chassis for the second time. Will it work? Let's give it a go. Let's apply power and monitor the oscilloscope for clock. 3, 2, 1, go. We do have clock straight away. As I've been said again, I've been playing with this board. It shouldn't be too hot, but it worked straight away. So let me try and cool it down and see if anything changed this time. Nice and cool. Let's power up. 3, 2, 1, go. Oh, it's still working. I mean, it's covered in, it's white, it's covered in ice. So, yeah, that's a good sign, I guess. Properly frozen. Let's try again. 3, 2, 1, go. It's working. Was that voltage regulator and a bad soldering joint all this time? Now I remember the 24 inches monitor. I did replace the voltage regulator, but I couldn't find anything wrong with it. It would measure the right voltage, but the monitor just worked only when warmed up. And I replaced them and it worked. Again, that was ages ago, so I can't remember if I had an oscilloscope. I definitely didn't have the skills I have now. So I'm just wondering whether the main problem with this monitor was the soldering joint with the voltage regulator. And by warming up this area, I just slightly moved that joint. It made better contact and the CPU would start. And I thought it was a capacitor. Now, this monitor needed a recap anyways, so that wasn't wasted time. But it seems to be working. I guess I will know in probably a few days. I'll keep trying. When it's cold, particularly, I'll leave it off for a while, come back and turn it on and turn it off, that kind of stuff. Only then will I know whether the fix is working or not. One thing to keep in mind is that the voltage regulator might have been faulty, and I fixed it, temporarily obviously, with my soldering iron, just with the heat. Obviously, when you're reflowing everything, the chip will reach higher temperatures, and that sometimes fixes the internal broken part of the chip, obviously for a limited amount of time. So, time will tell whether that was the problem. This monitor has lived on my floor for a few days and I've been turning it on and off with pretty cold temperatures here in my workshop, so it's always worked. And I'm assuming the actual problem, the real root problem, was the voltage regulator and not the capacitors. Now, I'm still happy I have recapped the monitor because most of these capacitors were actually in pretty bad shape. I'm not planning to replace this monitor, so it's nice to have given the monitor some extra years to live. Now, if the fault with this monitor was actually that voltage regulator, this is going to be my third DELL monitor where the very same voltage regulator in the same place, in the same position, has failed over the years. So before I'm closing the monitor and call it a day, I'd like to see what kind of temperature that voltage regulator is running, because if 3 voltage regulators failed on 3 separate monitors, that might suggest that the regulator is running at a pretty high temperature, and over the years, with lots of thermal cycles on and off and on and off, the joints eventually fail. So let me turn on the monitor and feed some video signal so it doesn't turn off by itself, and then in a while we'll take a look with the thermal camera and see what kind of temperature we have around this board. The monitor has been on for a few hours, and I think I can see why those capacitors were not in the best shape. The hottest part of the board is around the memory modules here. My thermal camera is reading 65 degrees, and I think the hottest point is actually behind this pad here. Maybe you can see some lots of vias here, and I think there was a voltage regulator or some sort of IC at the back of the board. So that's definitely the hottest part, and that explains probably why I think it was this capacitor here started leaking, and most of the capacitors around this area were not in their best shape. The CPU is running at 65 degrees. I'm using my thermocouple because thermal cameras don't like shiny objects like aluminum heatsinks. And yeah, I mean, overall, there's quite a lot of heat generated on inside this monitor. The lamps are generating quite a lot of heat. I mean, this panel here is pretty warm. I think it's probably around 40-50 degrees. And this panel here, which I think is where the high voltage for the lamp is generated, I mean, it's uncomfortable to touch after a few seconds. So yeah, there's quite a lot of heat generated. The main power supply is not too bad. The hottest part is the main transformer, as you can imagine. Now you have to consider that this monitor is now fully opened, so it can dissipate the heat pretty easily, but eventually there will be a metal cage on top of the board and a plastic case on top of everything. Fair enough, the monitor is going to be in a vertical position, so convection will help a lot, but there's no fan, so I don't know, considering the thermal camera is reading 65 around here, the CPU is running at 65, and again the lamps are generating heat, everything is pretty warm around here. I don't know, I'm assuming that this monitor is normally running in this area here around 80 degrees all the time, and I've got 18 degrees in the workshop today. I guess during summertime or in a warmer place it's probably going up to 90. So for a 15 years old monitor, I think I'm actually pretty impressed by, you know, how long this monitor lasted without complaining about anything. Now, what puzzles me a bit is why the 3 monitors I've had in my life, they all failed in the same point, these voltage regulators. If I'm getting closer to the voltage regulator, you can see that the thermal camera says it's around 56 degrees, so nothing really particularly concerning compared to other components on the board. Well, fingers crossed, this monitor seems to be working totally fine, so I guess it's time to close it up and put it back on its stand. It's back! Well, I'm happy with the outcome of this repair. It started as the usual capacitor problem, kind of boring, swap the capacitors and everything works again. But no, it was something else, and I'm actually happy that I didn't realize the problem was the regulator in the first place, because those capacitors actually needed to be replaced. So happy that I did that, so hopefully this monitor will go on for a while, and a bit puzzled about that regulator failing on all my DELL monitors. I'm actually sorry for this black line here. I really like this monitor. The picture quality is absolutely outstanding, and it's got plenty of inputs which work with everything I've got here. So I'm sorry for that, but again, for the workshop this is fine. And I guess hopefully with these capacitors and the fix on the voltage regulator, this monitor will stay here for a little while longer. I do appreciate I haven't replaced all the capacitors inside the monitor. I left behind that little USB daughter board, but I don't really use that part of the monitor, so I'm hoping that, you know, it doesn't really matter. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, as usual, I'd appreciate a thumb up down below, and also consider subscribing to this channel if you like this kind of things. For now, I wish you a great day, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again soon here on this channel for my next videos. Thank you very much, and goodbye. Bye bye.